Antonio, pídeme de encenderla.
Our first presentation is from Tiago Martins, and Tiago is coming remote. And Tiago, we can hear you fine. And
can you hear me?
Yes, you're
great.
You may not hear us, but we can hear you.
All good.
Go ahead and get started.
Let me know if you can see the slides now.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, looks good. So, hello everyone. My name is Tiago. I'm associated with the Art University in Linz, more concretely the Interface Cultures Department. My apologies for not being there with you all today. Unfortunately, I have to do this remote because of situations out of my control. I'm going to talk to you a bit about Archive, which is an AR experience, a sort of future-facing AR experience interface for interacting and exploring digital art archives. As an overview, so as I said, this is a mixed reality interface, also kind of a experience per se of a digital archive. In this case, it is meant to be for a digital archive of digital art, the ADA, which I guess most of you are by now quite familiar with. This is meant to be both a conceptual research tool, so a tool for researchers to explore an archive, but also for other people to, let's say, even play with it and discover new content. So there is a kind of ambivalence here, or the attempt to have the cake and eat it at the same time. It is a self-contained experience, or it's meant to be. So you could pop up an AR headset at your office or in your room or in your house. But also this could be shown at exhibitions and hopefully also used to complement the contents that are on display. So an exhibition or an actual archive with physical materials, if that would be the case. We started with a focus on one artist, or in this case, the artist duo, Christo Sommerville and Laurent Mignonneau, who have over 50 works over time. And there is already a traveling show present at the ZKM, which will be then traveling to other cities around the world. And so we try to direct a bit our efforts in order to have a functioning, let's say, prototype. It is effectively work in progress. So prototype or demo that can be experienced and played with at the exhibition venues. The project is very focused now on a HoloLens 2, which is a wearable AR device, so a headset, which you can see the real world through these clear, transparent visor, but also then projects on your eyes these very bright, colorful AR elements, which they call holograms. It tracks your hands, and it does also other things like eye tracking, which we're not currently using. For a bit of context here, this is being developed as part of a larger project called LIFO for short. Feel free to read the name in German. I translated here for you. It's about teaching and research infrastructure, let's say tools also for digital arts at universities, kindly funded by the Federal Ministry of Republic of Austria, where we were based, and in partnership with two other universities, the Donau-Universität Krems and the Universität für angewandte Kunst in Krems and Wien, respectively, also both in Austria. Thanks to our partners for the help and good feedback they have provided. Our role in this project, ours, Kunstuni Linz, role is twofold, or our main tasks are twofold. So one is the development of this exploratory AR interface, but we also contribute with materials for the archive of digital art. So we have someone or several people tasked with scanning, producing high quality scans and archiving materials related to the works of Christa and Laurent, printed materials like catalogs, articles, but also eventually transparent materials. Our focus in this paper naturally is the AR interface. In order to develop such a tool, there were some considerations we took into account. Types of data, amounts, what can we get from a database, or what could we possibly get from the ADA, although we're not using ADA directly yet. But also thinking about a future-facing content types or things that are not so common. So common would be texts, images, videos. Less common would be 3D scans, spherical panoramas, and things like this. As I said, starting focus is on Christian Laurent's works. Let's start short. That's already a lot of material in any case. Shall we do it AR or VR? AR or VR is this very old discussion. You can always say that soon, anytime soon, there will be, we are starting to see a bit of a merger of these two technologies or modes. I would say there are some advantages in VR, like having more control over the scene, over how things interact in the scene, because it's all, let's say, digital. So you as a designer, as a programmer, have a bit more control of how things behave. AR lets you be more present in the world, co-present, also interact with other people, be able to see at the same time virtual materials from the archive, but also things like your notes, your posters, and everything you have in your office or in your research space. But then we also have to manage the fact that you have no control over what might be in the space, over what the user might do with actual real objects. And of course, this can all be programmed or supplemented, but it depends on what kind of knowledge the hardware and the software gives you already about the space. The choice of device fell on the HoloLens 2. This is a very high-end device. It's not meant for, I would say, everyday users or mass market. It's a very enterprise device, or at least the business case they're trying to put it under or sell it under. This is a wearable. It's pretty comfortable, but in being a wearable, it does all the work itself. So it has, at this point, let's say, the processing or rendering power of a high-end smartphone of a couple of years ago. So there are limitations, naturally. We cannot show certain types of effects and visually breathtaking scenes as we do when we have a powerful PC rendering VR. It does have knowledge of the environment mesh, so it knows to a certain degree the geometry up to 3 or 4 meters away. So we can know where there are, let's say, walls or surfaces, which is pretty cool. And it does hand tracking. It tracks your hands quite well, but not as precisely. It's not as precise as a VR controller. And of course, then we also have to have attention to this. One of the things that are more peculiar in the visual design part is that the display, it's a see-through display, so you can see the whole world up to all your peripheral vision, but the part of the AR display is actually kind of limited. So the viewport would be something like kind of this in front of you. So if you try to show a virtual object that's very, very big, or a small one that's very up close, you do see it cut out at the edges, and this can become kind of distracting. Also, we cannot show dark shapes or very dark shapes because this is essentially light being projected over what you already see with your own eyes from the surrounding environment. So black objects are effectively invisible. For inspirations, we took a couple of works from Christa Sommer and Laurent Mignonneau, or let me just focus on a few ones. These are kind of reactive rooms where the user is surrounded by media, words, and images. These spaces, they listen to you, listen to your conversation, and provide you this kind of stimulus or complement. I think it's an interesting idea of being immersed in your thoughts or having this kind of mind palace. And this sort of swirling chaos, if I can call it like this, which can be disorganized, but also a bit serendipitous, where something might show up that catches your eye and lets you follow the conversation, or lets you have some sort of insight you would not have with an ordered display. Luc Couchen's Naked in Paradise. So Luc is cataloging old materials, but also we're on his travels recording new voice clips and spherical panoramas and things like this, and then he displays it in VR in different ways. There's a timeline, there's a more, let's say, also chaotic, if I may say so, way of showing things. These are all laid out in space, and it's kind of funny to see that we ended up a little bit with something that looks kind of similar, but I guess that makes sense in any way. Database, digital archive will serve you a lot of 2D content for sure. Even if it hosted things like 3D models, most of the content by far now is 2D. This would be images, videos, and of course, a lot of text. So how would we show this taking advantage of 3D physical space? And I think these two are pretty good clues. One is Geoffrey Shaw's Legible City, and the other is Type in Space, which is a HoloLens app we had a lot of fun playing with. This shows how even text elements, let's say 2D elements, can also be used perhaps even creatively to construct architecture, and users can take the existing contents of an archive and just play with it as building blocks, like, let's say, Minecraft. In the overall design, there's also a lot of different kinds of inspirations, things like construction sets. So as I said, due to the display, it's a good idea to use bright colors, but also small modular elements versus big monolithic constructions. So we went a bit with the playful approach and the bright colors and things that you could assemble yourself, or construction pieces that then we can use to assemble different views of the materials of the archive. And one of the most important ones down in the corner is these mind maps, especially on the detective movies, when you go in, the crazy detective that's been kicked out of the force, but he's still investigating the case, and the room is full of pictures and lines. Maybe not the best example of sanity, but as a spatial way of organizing an archive and showing relationships between objects. Okay. I'm told here that my internet connection might be a bit unstable. Apologies for that. We're using very limited resources here, but hopefully you can follow. We produced UX storyboards, which I will go through very quickly with actual examples. And you can see that some of these translated pretty well into the actual prototype. So the starting scene, which is, let's say, the home scene, we'll also call it the galaxy, shows this view of all the artworks as little planets or spheres with little shapes swirling around them. At the center in a ring, highlighted are 11 artworks. In this case, these are the same 11 artworks that are present at the exhibition in ZKM. So these works that are there are highlighted in the center, and everything else is spread out in also a kind of chaotic manner. There is no necessarily no organization here, and they are actually kind of randomized every time to provide a little bit of freshness and hopefully some serendipity. So the user can approach these items and touch one of them, and it opens up, it pops up into a swirl of media. I call this a swirl. It's a set of revolving media items, in this case, images, keywords, and videos that are related to the artwork. The swirl can be repositioned by holding a handle under the sphere that stays in the center. So you can grab the handle and move the swirl around horizontally to another position. Images and keywords and videos, so media items that are in the swirl, swirling around, can be picked up and removed from the swirl. And you can leave them lying around and make your compositions, let's say in mid-air if you want. But you can also bring these close to a surface, and there would be this dotted line that says, okay, if you release this image now, it will attach to the surface. So you can use basically anything that's at least more or less 5 by 5 centimeters that the HoloLens is able to detect. In your hand, there's a set of tools. This goes both for right hand or left hand. There's a set of tools. The biggest and most visible one is perhaps the cube. We also have a little menu with a home and a back button, much like a web browser, and a pin. The cube is a sort of inventory. It's a box where you can put things. You can pick up these media items from anywhere and store them in the box. It will shrink down and go in there. You can put a lot of them inside, and only the 5 last ones that you put, the 5 more recent ones, are visible. While in your hand, the box is relatively small. It's like this. You can look at it, but it's hard to pick up things from there. So you can pick the whole box up from your hand and drop it on the floor, and it enlarges. And then once it's this size, you can remove things from inside. You can also put them back in, but it's a little bit more easy to handle. The reason for the inventory is that you don't need to carry one by one these media items. If you're working in a big space or making a big composition, you can just put everything in a box and then bring the box somewhere, put it on the floor, and then attach these to the wall as you wish. The box could also serve other purposes in the future. The pin allows you to pin things. They don't necessarily stay in place, but it's a metaphor for creating lines between items. So you pick up a pin, bring it next to an image or word or video, attach it there. And then when you pick up another pin and you bring it close to an existing pin, it creates a line between those. And then in this way, you can create connections between items, much like a mind map. Just an overview of what the scene would look like at this point. So we have already in the wall a little mind map that was made. Things can then be moved and the lines stay there so they don't disappear if I pick up a word and put it somewhere else. Keywords can also be expanded. So I grab a keyword with both hands, stretch it, and it pops up into a word cloud. Word clouds in 3D are really cool. We're usually seeing them on the screen, but when you actually feel the depth of the cloud, it's pretty interesting. Items on the cloud, much like in the swirl, can be picked up and then expanded again. So you can keep going into a cloud and another cloud and another cloud. It looks pretty dense here and hard to read because the words are overlapping each other. But believe me, when you see this in stereoscopic 3D, your brain has a very little problem distinguishing words from each other based on depth. So yeah. There's a lot of technical details about this. You can also ask me afterwards. This is all made in Unity using something called the toolkit, a mixed reality toolkit on Windows PC, made specifically for the HoloLens, but this could be ported to other platforms. It would take some work for sure, but it is possible. It runs on a small local database. We made up our own small database of materials from Christian Laurent. These are stored on the device. The database itself is stored on the device, but all the media is used anywhere without a setup. As long as I have a connection to the server, I can just take the HoloLens, put it in my head and start the app. So wherever I am, let's say there's a connection to the server, it would be fine. Doesn't any previous setup of the room. This is what it looks like when you're developing it on Unity. It's a lot of fun. It's currently being presented as part of the larger exhibition, The Artwork as a Living System, with 11 works from Christian Laurent at the ZKM. And if you happen to pass by Linz during the Ars Electronica Festival, you would catch the same exhibition and be able to try it out by yourself and maybe see me around. Not sure how I'm on time, but I guess I should wrap this up now. So there's, of course, a lot of future work. Some things include, on a shorter term, providing a sort of tutorial, because this is a lot to learn in a very short time and a lot to explain. When you don't actually see what people are doing and seeing, it's kind of hard to explain to them if you don't know exactly what they see. Things for a longer term would be including more material from the ADA, eventually an actual connection to the ADA itself. And of course, other collections and data visualizations, hopefully still within this paradigm of expanding things and closing things. I think this is a good metaphor and it should be used a lot better. So I don't know exactly if I took that much time or not, but thanks for your patience. And if you have questions, you can ask me when there is time or write me an email.
Thank you very much. I want to be there now. Next, we have Adriana. Adriana, if you could introduce yourself. And,
And Julia.
Julia, okay.
Photo?
Where do you move the slides?
Yes.
Okay. To the
The
side,
arrows
yeah?
to the
Yeah.
side, left and right.
All right. Thank you for having us here. We will start sharing a video that resumes a great deal of our research project. Just put in here. Sorry, the volume is not working.
Could we have audio for a second?
I don't know, I pressed the volume button, but it seems that something else came up. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not very loud, but it's okay if it plays a little bit. So, practicing Odin Theater's archive is an ongoing research project funded by the Flanders Research Institute, taking place at Ghent University in Belgium. It is an interdisciplinary collaboration between two departments, the Studies in Performing Arts and Media, and the Institute for Psychoacoustics and Electronic Music. And Julia and I, we are the main researchers of the project. We have also additional institutions that are collaborating with us, mainly Manchester Metropolitan University, Aalborg University, Utrecht University, and the Nordisk Theater Laboratorium in Denmark.
This presentation draws on new approaches in performance studies concerned with the development of an epistemological framework for studying theatrical training techniques through archival reconfigurations in virtual reality. By sharing this ongoing research process, we aim to nourish the pressing discussion in archive studies on how to account for the documentation of embodied knowledge and intangible cultural heritage. The demands of such a discussion in current times call for a careful rearticulation of the goals of the production of archives, bringing space for the experience of the encounter of a user with the living materiality of the documents archived to unfold into new ways of making sense of the embedded, embodied knowledge displayed. The aim is to investigate what it means to develop, practice, and perform an archive through the activation of Odin Theater's embodied legacy in a virtual environment, addressing the translation of technique through extended reality whilst developing dramaturgical approaches to archival practices. Odin Theatret is one of the oldest theater groups in the world, with a tradition of research in embodied practices for more than 50 years. The group is the main force of the broader artistic institution known as Nordisk Theater Laboratorium in Denmark, which today is also home to new generations who have built their artistic work in dialogue with Odin's legacy. Over these decades, Odin has built up an extensive archive that is a fundamental source of knowledge for creators, academic students, and theater researchers.
Odin Theater's archive involves not only the written documents stored over its 50 years of history, but also the codified physical training methods that the group developed to enhance the actors' bodily skills and presence. Therefore, in proposing the incorporation of archival documentation as a technological process that includes embodied knowledge, we look at contemporary strategies for dealing with histories of theatrical creation in which the user plays an active role in collaborating with the past and its future ramifications. By doing so, we follow the current discourse on archival practices by urging users and developers to reread history as a reconfiguration of documents, oral tales, and reconstructions through affective transmissions, where, quoting Rebecca Schneider, architectures of access places us in particular experiential relationships to knowledge. In this way, we take also on the challenge that Sueli Romik proposed as a rereading of Derrida's famous archive fever essay, when she says that asking about the politics of inventory becomes necessary since there are many ways to approach the artistic practices one wants to inventory. Such policies are distinguished less by the technical options that guide the production of an archive and more by the poetic force that the proposed device itself is able to convey. I am referring to its aptitude to make the practices inventoried have the possibility of activating sensitive experiences in the presence, necessarily different from those originally lived, but with the same critical density. Faced with this proposal, a question soon arises. What would be a poetic inventory itself be like? That is, the production of an archive for and not about an artistic experience or its mere cataloging.
During this project, then, we are facing the challenge of designing a navigation system through virtual reality, allowing us for an embedded embodiment to engage interactively and creatively with the archival material. This archive aims to feature two different forms for content. The first are the work demonstrations, which will be recorded and can be viewed in a more passive way. Work demonstrations are another way of speaking of performance lectures in a way. They are performative pieces, entanglements of the web of techniques that link the practitioners to subjectivities, histories, aesthetics, and to each other. The other part of the content, which is much more challenging, aims at translating technique in the virtual space. By means of motion capturing and other sensors, we begin to design an interactive system where the user can learn and train with theater practices taught by the practitioners as virtual avatars, or better, as virtual figures. This content is divided in three parts: exercises, which are goal-oriented, training principles, which explore, for instance, certain qualities of sound and movement, and tactics of composition, where these exercises and training principles are applied to artistic creation.
So from the perspective of a theater practitioner, in an organized performance situation, the performer's physical and mental presence is modeled according to principles which are different from those in the daily life. This extra daily use of the body-mind is what is called technique. The performer's different techniques can be conscious and codified, or else unconscious, but implicit in the use and repetition of a scenic practice. Transcultural analysis shows that it's possible to distinguish recurring principles in these techniques by means physical patterns that can be found in many different performance traditions around the world. These recurring principles are altered balance, which is an alteration of the daily technique of walking, of moving in space and keeping the body immobile, which leads to complex and seemingly superfluous luxury balance. Dynamic opposition, which is in the way in which a performer's body is shaped by a myriad of microtensions between opposing intentional forces. Consistent inconsistency, which are the ways in which scenic behavior is consistent within the realm of theatrical practice, but inconsistent in terms of daily life. Reduction, which is reducing the size of an action in space whilst maintaining the energetic quality in time. Equivalence, which is the building of scenic equivalence to daily behavior. And actor's dramaturgy, the amalgamation of the pre-expressive principles in the actor's body as an archive. And they are investigated with precise reference to the metaphors and technical vocabulary of various performance traditions around the world by Eugenio Barba, which is the director of Odin Teatret. They reside in written documents, audiovisual material, and most importantly, in the body as archive of the practitioners. This beginning of the research then focused on this particular challenge relating to movement archiving, which involves the development of algorithms for retrieval, classification, and recognition of such recurring principles. We won't have time here to expand on all the practices that we are capturing, but we would like to show 2 short videos that can give you an impression of the material that we are aiming to archive. So this is Iben Naho Rasmussen. She's one of the oldest Odin actresses at the moment, and she's performing an exercise that is called Hour of Balance, where you almost fall, and then you have to throw the energy of the fall to another direction. And this is Mika Jusler, which is a pupil from Iben Naho Rasmussen, performing an exercise that actually comes from mime that is called plastics, where you have to segment different parts of your body and create different impulses from these parts of the body.
These practices were mapped into data and performed several times with intermissions for feedback on the capturing process by 10 practitioners, both performers from Odin Theatret and long-term pupils of them, which throughout their own careers have incorporated and transformed the original practices, adapting them accordingly to situated cultural circumstances, professional careers, and contemporary politics that have affected the theater landscape. This collaboration reinforces, therefore, the genealogy of the practices investigated, starting from their creators, reaching new generations. When creating such an archive, new possibilities and challenges arise alike. The body of the performer, as well as that of the avatar, present and not present at the same time, encodes the information within them into parallel ways. The physical body carries the embodied knowledge in its materiality, while the virtual body holds patterns of information which can change with the slightest tweak of the code. Thus, it is this translation of information from theater practices to patterns of data, and then to an experience that will reintroduce the archive as an embodied experience, which will inevitably be of another nature than the one first captured with the practitioners. We are called to translate corporeal energies into virtual forces, physical bodies into their abstracted virtual counterparts, physical and vocal technique to metadata to an immersive architecture for navigating archives.
This term, following anthropologist Tim Ingold, that has followed philosopher and sociologist Henri Lefebvre, refers to the communicative fabric that mediates between the structural properties of space and the spatial or communicative practices that reproduce space. These new technologies we are playing with are becoming able to allow us to think processes of archiving differently, not anymore as a mere reproductions of what we suppose as truth, but as different translation systems which expose other logics to the process of acting upon knowledge. We begin to step away from the process of knowledge representation towards processes of techno-organic translations, which allows technique to be constantly actualized and reassembled as models for praxis and transmission.
We will now show you some excerpts from one of our first experiments called the 6 states of water, where we looked at the effective relationship between the body and the environment. Our hypothesis here is that designed virtual textures provoke and evoke changes in the quality of one's movements through an interactive play with such environments. This experiment was designed upon an exercise created by Odin actress Roberta Carreri, in which the trainee performs a movement score with different qualities of energy, namely fog, bubbles, little creek, Amazon River, iceberg, sea tempest. In our XR version, the participant moves through the 6 environments, being able to interact with them, carving space and creating space. The findings of the experiment will be analyzed both qualitatively and quantitatively, applying lab and effort analysis in the motion capture data collected. We have thus begun to design environments that can change one's movement quality, providing visual stimulus for interaction, allowing us to expand the digital topological analysis and description of actions into an affective and immersive experience to the user. Ultimately, we are aiming for a system which, inspired by Deleuze's ontology, will unfold space as a dynamic force embedded in topological textures, which allow the transmission of embodied knowledge through virtual interaction. In dealing with theater techniques, one's interest in research lies in creating and codifying different qualities of moving, which are filled with subtle intensities. In a few words, more than creating scores of movement, an actor looks for the inner processes within these scores. These inner processes have naturally an intrinsic relation to physical patterns of movement, slow, fast, strong, soft, and so on. Aligned with Deleuze's enunciation that difference in quality is subtended by a special difference, we argue that the articulation of this difference is one's inner processes can be produced by the encounter of the user with a design environment. Encounters, from his perspective, are generative and catalysts of processes of making sense, altering one's bodily qualities in similar fashion to the ways in which the recurring principles mentioned previously are articulated to enhance a performance presence.
As we are now, these designed virtual environments have become praxical territories that stimulate proprioception and kinesthesia, activated through the play between the immaterialities of the virtual and the actual. As I have mentioned elsewhere, the term praxical territory denotes the discipline-specific knowledge we each one of us carry, and its imbrication with our wider lived subjective experience. This fusion of craft and life opens up a space and place that reverberates with legacy and landscapes of mutual belongings. So we have shared in these writings an ongoing research process, which aims to nourish the pressing discussion in archive studies on how to account for the documentation of embodied knowledge and intangible cultural heritage. The demands of such a discussion in current times call for a careful rearticulation of the goals of the production of archives, bringing space for the experience of the encounter of a user with the living materiality of the documents archived to unfold into new ways of making sense of the embedded, embodied knowledge displayed. By elaborating on hybrids of both physical and virtual spaces, we allow a user to drift towards a new awareness of embodied knowledge transmission, production, and distribution, in which the freedom of a theater laboratory provides the space for an interactive and creative encounter with codified artistic techniques and practices through virtual reality immersion. In this sense, the archive becomes a dramaturgical tool for the actor, dancer, and performer, an architecture of access to find one's way through the great amount of data available nowadays through lived experience. Thank you.
Thanks.
If you have questions, or we can talk later on, or my contact and Julia's contact is in here, so we can keep in touch.
Let's take a 5-minute break. Oh, we have a comment. Question? Okay.
Congratulations, it's really the presentation that you are doing. I have a question about this wonderful finding can become part of an avatar, or can become part of human culture, embodied human culture. I don't know if it is clear.
More or less, you said it is a wonderful finding. What do you mean?
Just this investigation,
yeah,
this research, this possibility,
yeah,
can become simply as part of this virtual world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about the next step of Facebook, for example.
Right. Yeah.
And
of metaverse, you mean?
I'm afraid of that.
Me too, very much.
Because this is the point I'm thinking. ISEA is bringing this link between humanism and technology.
Yeah.
And I think this is the main thing here.
Yeah.
Because if we go to, for example, cognitive science, it's possible to have really interesting findings, but not everybody is making this link.
Right.
Did you make it?
We are trying to be as far as possible away for the moment of this understanding of the metaverse, and this is should be at least for now, for the protection of this material, which is so precious, a sort of a closed environment. Maybe who knows if it's going to be online or not is a different question, because we understand the problems where you can come in. And also the representation of the body of these practitioners through little video gaming avatars, it's very complicated. So I think the whole part of this research is focusing very much on what does it mean to put a body into this virtual space, and how we would like to display the body. And for the practitioners themselves, because we are trying to do that as a close group of 10 practitioners, so we can have a very close contact with them, so they can have a huge say on how they would like to be seen and what is important to be seen. For instance, this body that is very fully rooted, that Julia wonderfully designed, the idea is that this body can display the flows of energy of such exercises. So it has also an important pedagogical sense in this way.
Excuse me, because to complete, it's just how our body is extended more far from the heart and the shoes.
Yeah.
It's an extension.
Yeah.
And this concept, I think, is wonderful. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
You brought up some very interesting points that I hope are discussed more in depth at the roundtable this afternoon on ethics and archiving. And I hope you can join us, because your project definitely brings up some questions and some discussion points that I think are very important when we bring our bodies into the archive.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Let's take a 5-minute break while we load up the next set of presentations, and after those we'll have a big lunch break. Okay, 5 minutes.
I was looking for you.
They were on their. They're very disappointed that they can't be here in Barcelona, but it's beyond their control. And that is Tabia and Jürgen. Jürgen, coming in any moment now. Oh, I think they're here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also for the kind invitation and this great conference, which we were listening since 2 days now. When preparing our presentation, we thought that we would like to bring the two main subjects, futures and heritage, and also education and society closer together. So we have two parts in our presentation. First, presenting the tools, which we also describe in our proceedings, but then also comment shortly on how far these tools could contribute to facilitating digital accessibility to cultural assets. And concerning our conceptual frameworks in terms of assumptions, we think that the question of access is the central issue in dealing with cultural and digital archived data for the future, but that the potential has not been exploited so far. And we also think that easy to use, secure and network-based forms of access can increase both visibility and significance, as well as sustainability and longevity of data. And approaching the subject from the perspective of access and reuse, our tools require server-based infrastructure with ideally collection management or database running with semantic metadata, and all those files should be digitally addressable. So when entering cultural institutions today, one finds quite a number of monitor systems with general information about the institution, respective exhibitions, and so on. And the deeper you get into the gallery space, the more artistic the content on the displays come. And here you see my library and our digital archive, which is displayed in relation to the books to invite people to access the archives too. But most of the time, and sometimes it's important that files are redone and are composed in different exhibitions and so on. And we are not talking about interactive installations as we saw before, or complex systems, but rather the everyday screen information, which is basically static or possibly dynamic, but with little interaction here. And then the content is very often brought to the devices by hand on digital data carriers. And sometimes even the devices have to be started up every morning by hand and shut down during the evening if you want to save resources or conserve lifetime of the devices. So our screen system tries to automatize this process. The screens fetch their data from a network and are staffed via proxy. This ensures not only the data to be displayed correctly on the correct display at the correct time, but also to detach the whole system from the internet. We use, for example, outdated Mac computers, which were not longer allowed to connect to the internet.
So from the network point of view, our system consists of a proxy, which is the center of communication of the InfoScreen system. This proxy is located somewhere in the cloud. All clients will connect via encrypted connection to the proxy and authenticate themselves via a certificate. This way, a very secure VPN-like network is built up. On the display side, the system uses Google Chrome web browser for displaying the content. This means that we can use a powerful multimedia engine of the Chromium system. The InfoScreen client, which is programmed in Go language, which does the connection to the proxy, also controls the web browser via the Chrome debug protocol. This allows us to fully control the content without relying only on JavaScript and HTML techniques. Therefore, we are able to show video, PDF, images, as well as 3D content and animations, everything which is possible with a modern web browser. For autoplay of videos, we had to implement some tricks to make it possible. On the controller side, there's another software piece programmed in Go language, which is responsible for control of the contents on all attached display clients. Here you can see what happens within the encrypted connection. There are several protocols implemented to multiplex between any clients. The gRPC protocol is used for high-speed procedure calls between clients and controllers to send comments to the displays. Via HTTP, it is possible to display content within the secure network to show objects which are not available on the internet. Since we are using old hardware as display clients, we found out that the clock is an issue for displaying multi-client content like tickers or videos moving automatically over many screens and so on. To achieve a common clock, we implemented NTP over gRPC to synchronize all browsers internally. So the display content normally consists of a website and additional data which is JSON encoded. The website can be used on many screens and only the JSON part is different. In this example, you can see a slideshow where JSON consists of a list of URLs with images, timing information, and optional captions. This means that curation of slideshows just required the creation of some JSON files with URLs. For videos, you can specify start and play time if only excerpts shall be shown. Like the display clients, the controller can run on any machine which can connect to the proxy. You can have multiple controllers and therefore they can even run on local laptop. Since the controller exposes a REST API, and you can see here a Windows PowerShell script which configures and starts one display system by loading a website, the JSON parameter into the system and just starting it.
So in addition to automatized feeding of the screens via a command line tool, a web interface was developed that generates screenshots of all running systems in real time. This helps to coordinate and fine-tune your curatorial program. For example, when the screens are displayed at different places in the museum and you can't see all of them exactly. It also helps debugging because you can see if problems occur. And a second thing which you have here with the remote control and the single screen you see here is that you can send, for example, specific images, URLs, or screenshots. Like if an important VIP group comes and you have to show their archive, you are within a few seconds, you have the material on. And also for emergency reason, you can prepare information which could direct the audience to the next emergency exit or inform them in case of a disaster. Another topic I wanted to mention is that using the Chrome web browser as displaying engine is also very useful in the curatorial process of selecting and arranging specific shows, since you do not have to store tons of data locally on your desktop. You just curate your URLs and watch your material. And in addition to your own material, you could send the screen also to different museums, to screens in the public space, or to single private users at home, like in the lockdown situation. Focusing on distributed net communities and the visibility of archived content in addition to human usage or interaction in terms of like classical research situations, we would like to address another target group: machines or audiences which require automatized access to data. Even though this target group is less visible because they do not come on site, they play an increasingly important role for the cultural sector. They intend to see, analyze, and explore cultural data from a distance. At least within the scientific field, the convention of the so-called FAIR principles has been established during the last years to provide specifications on how findability, accessibility, and interoperability are achieved. And since data which can't be reduced or reproduced beyond the very limited scope of quotation, since relatively worthless for many actors, reusability has been added as fourth principle.
So many of the requirements presented here are provided already by existing catalog systems or databases. But the others, which can be technically implemented, are supplemented by our FAIR service. Due to the fact that reusability is mostly a question of licenses, policies, and metadata quality, the FAIR service focuses on the other core areas of the principles: findability, accessibility, and interoperability. Technically, three things are particularly important: a redirector service that makes objects findable even if they are stored in a different location, the documentation of deletions, and the provision of a standardized metadata interface so that data can be accessed automatically. Automated query and reuse of metadata is usually enabled by an OAI PMH interface. And within this interface, the existing metadata schema is mapped to a normalized schema. Currently, the FAIR service supports Dublin Core and the DataSite metadata model due to the fact that these are widely used. The graphic again shows the three core elements of the redirector, the OAI PMH interface for metadata harvesting, and the administration interface with the REST API into which the metadata of the master system are automatically brought. We populate the interface with data in a specific publish to FAIR service process. To store its data, the FAIR service uses its own database. In our case, it's PostgreSQL. This database ensures the persistence of the data. Persistence is ensured in the FAIR service in two ways. On the one hand, the PostgreSQL database holds the descriptive data of the master system. If this system fails temporarily, for example, data can come directly from the FAIR service. Another form or mode of persistence is provided by the so-called redirector. Here the objects are, so to speak, followed, even if their physical location on the storage system or the archive system changes. The figure also shows external services that are necessary for the creation of so-called persistent identifiers. These identifiers are usually assigned and managed by globally recognized agencies. We use the commonly known PIDs, persistent identifiers, from handle.net and DOEs from DataSite. For each dataset, the FAIR service creates a new handle using a local service programmed in Go language. These handles can be compared to a name server record, but at the URL level of each single object. This means that the handles and their associated target URLs are managed locally in a database and can be retrieved at any time from the globally managed handle.net server. For using handle, you first have to request a so-called handle prefix at handle.net. This prefix and the handle server is then set up and managed locally. The handle prefix can be compared to an ordinary domain name, except that handle has some claim on sustainability. DataSite's DOIs use the same technology, but DOIs are centrally managed by DataSite and are also enriched by metadata. They are mainly used in the context of scientific publications. If you look at the data interface of the OAI PMH service with a web browser, it looks like something like this. On the left side, you see the Dublin Core, and on the right, the DataSite metadata schema of the same dataset. In reality, however, the OAI PMH interface delivers pure XML, which is usually rendered graphically in the browser using an XML style sheet. For controlling which content is made publicly available via the FAIR service, a reduced web interface was developed. On the left side, you can see that in the FAIR service, there are automatically created handles for each record. On the right side, you can see a detailed view of such a dataset with the possibility to create an additional DOI by using the Create DOI button. Since DOI facilitates citation in scientific publication and enjoy a higher reputation there, it can make sense to use a DOI in addition to the handle, which also generates persistence. We don't want to go into the difference between DOI and handle here. What seems more important is that you can see here the DOI at the DataSite website, which refers to the redirector of the FAIR service, which leads back to our own catalog system.
In the catalog system, the material is displayed like always. In our case, we have video and audio data, and also PDFs, or in this case, we have 3 PDFs and a lot of metadata, just as much as you want to show. The last thing we wanted to mention regarding the FAIR service is that it is designed as a multi-tenancy software. This means that it is capable of managing different collections with varying policies, both in-house and also across institutions. So not each institution needs to run its own FAIR service to become fair, but institutions can cooperate and collaborate without visible kind of interference regarding policies or display conventions. Given the FAIR service as a metadata harvesting system, our InfoScreen system for curated slideshows or making archival goods visible on different displays, and the yesterday mentioned cooperation of collaborating archives, you can envision yesterday this small chart of possibly sharing infrastructure for all this kind of content. But this is not our topic. We wanted to comment on within this education and society requirements, we wanted to say that with a FAIR service, even smaller cultural institutions can easily drive their data collections, both transparent and open, on the one hand, and also bring it to a scientifically accepted format. This is especially important for funding and cooperation sometimes. Both systems, the FAIR service and the InfoScreen system, allowed cultural objects or data to reach outside the institutional framework and thus transcend limitations and also reach a broader public, both of institutional stakeholders as well as persons. And last but not least, collaboration and cooperation are fostered through both of the tools. You might ask if the community is already ready for these kind of tools, especially if you do not focus on the community which is present on the conference, which means people who work within the media art field for a long time, but it's a broader public and possibly also in other art forms. We would say yes. We just were able to be hosts of an open community call on performance art in Switzerland, which was a base for the Bang Bang exhibition, which is currently up in the Tanguy Museum in Basel. Unexpectedly, more than 2,700 artists and collective were contributing more than 1,500 entries. And here you see the red line. Possibly you can identify it as a section of a bigger picture of the 12,500 images, about 800 PDFs, about 1,100 video materials with 240 hours to watch and 8 hours to listen. And this all within 3 to 5 months. This is how a normal entry looks like. You have a video, you have image material, and also a lot of metadata, especially the festivals, which are also sometimes captured within one record. We sometimes have more than 40 entries, but there are also these kind of entries where only few PDFs are left, a link to a Vimeo website, and the comment that the artist brought all the material to a cultural collection and has no data left. To say it different, we do not want without providing open interfaces to our collections, which allow others to have access and to refer to data in a proper way, cultural institutions run the risk to become stakeholders which produce this kind of gaps. We rather prefer to bring artworks of historical, or in this case, technological obsolescence again to life. What you see here is a Salon Digital, which was produced by Walter von der Cruyssen in 1997 for the opening of Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe, in order to show the collection of the then new museum before entering the museum in an interactive computer game-like environment. For Bang Bang, the historical work was restored and is now showing the extensive database on performance art. And if you want, you can visit the website. So we are at the end. Thank you very much for your presentation, for your listening.
Come on up and get ready. Our next three presentations are short papers, and we'll begin with Ari, who will introduce himself.
Okay. It's this one. All right. So my name is Aki Järvinen. I work as an immersive technologist in a company called Digital Catapult. I will be sharing some of our learnings and insights from producing a retrospective of virtual reality content from the UK during last year. And I will, so very quickly about the organization that I work for. So Digital Catapult is a non-profit organization, a technology center based in London, in the United Kingdom. We are also in other places in the UK. We basically help UK businesses to adopt new so-called emerging digital technologies, including 5G, Internet of Things, and things like that. I work in the immersive technology team. What that means is that we help UK businesses to adopt virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, all the ARs in the XR space. And I want to mention this because I am a bit sort of feel a bit like fish out of water here, because I'm not in the sort of electronic art or archiving business, if you will. However, we do work in creative industries in many ways. And one of the ways that we do that is through so-called collaborative research and development programs. And the context for the retrospective that I'm talking about here is the Audience of the Future program, which was really a substantial involvement and investment by UKRI, which is a funding body in the UK. And we took part in this program to support it, and we conducted a number of pieces of research that you see here, sort of touching on the whole sort of aspect of what does it mean creating sort of immersive content in the arts, culture, entertainment space, what kind of business models are there, and so on and so forth. And actually the final piece of work that you see here is just became basically available like a month ago, where we mapped the sort of immersive content life cycle, as we call it, from different distribution of opportunities all the way to the challenges of archiving and restoring this kind of work. So that's also the sort of tie into this talk right here. And the second context really to this production was that we have been working in trying to sort of foster the UK creative scene in the immersive space. So over the last few years, we've run 3 cohorts in a program called Creative XR, which is about giving small pots of funding to creative teams to create a prototype in the immersive art space and then showcase it to the public and possible commissioners and exhibitors and so on and so forth. So when we got the chance to produce Immersive Arcade, the retrospective, which you see, and how it was up in Museum of Other Realities through virtual reality in the second picture here, we obviously leverage our experiences with working with creative teams and the whole sort of ecosystem, if you will. And so I'll rather let a video do the talking of what Immersive Arcade actually was. And so let me see, I'll just stop my sharing for a second. I'll share the page with the video. So let's start that, and hopefully this works. So for the next 5 minutes, I think it's worth showing this video, and then I'll summarize some of the learnings. So
Of a kind online and in-person exhibition, The Best Example, the first national collection of 12 of the best examples of virtual reality, VR, and 360 or immersive experiences created in the UK between 2000 and 2020. The collection has been realised by Digital Catapult in collaboration with the UKRI Audience of the Future Challenge. Those who visit the free immersive arcade, either at home via a VR headset or at the in-person showcase during the national tour, will emerge into a wide range of experiences in documentary, experiential and narrative genres.
The coolest thing about the immersive arcade is it's giving people an opportunity to see content that has vanished from the public sphere.
Even the people who work in the sector haven't necessarily seen the influential projects that have led us to where we are today, and that's what I think we were trying to correct.
There have been numerous challenges in creating the immersive arcade, from licensing to procurement to working internationally to working through a pandemic, and there was no playbook. This is the first national VR collection ever realised.
All 12 pieces of content had a variety of different production partnerships. They had creative ownership, they have legal ownership, they had different headsets that they were designed for originally, different interaction methods, and how to bring all this under the same virtual roof in the Museum of Other Realities was really a big ask.
You put on your headset and this virtual gallery, it doesn't feel like it apes a real gallery, it feels like it's a thing in its own right.
We wanted to really showcase the breadth of creativity in the UK immersive industry for things like documentaries such as Darren Emerson's Common Ground, as well as more experiential pieces like Charlotte Mickelborg's Fly.
The Immersive Arcade Tour has been all over the country, and we've been to a wide variety of different locations. We've tried demoing in shopping malls, in community restaurants, in private art galleries and in cinemas to make sure we reach the broadest audience possible.
Today we are in Coventry for the third day of the Immersive Arcade Tour, and as you can see we're in a shopping centre. Big mix of ages, ethnicities, lots of different VR experience levels as well, so really exciting.
You've pitched it as different things, saying like, do you want to try a VR experience? Alternatively, would you like to be an astronaut? Or how do you feel about trying something completely new?
Today we're at Parlour, which is in northwest London. It's a community restaurant and pub. It's a little bit of a different venue. We really wanted to reach out to a different type of people and a different type of audience.
Putting young women into technology is really important just because it's just good to have diversity for a variety of different ideas, being able to reach different audiences because different people know what different people want.
Flight was absolutely fantastic, so real.
It was so fun. I love it.
My favourite experience in Immersive Arcade would definitely have to be BBC Home VR Spacewalk. Just because growing up I loved space. I wanted to be an astronaut. Putting people through that experience as well is definitely something I enjoy, watching them panic as they get sent flying away from the ISS.
Fly is an interactive VR experience that takes you on a journey through humankind's relationship to flight.
I flapped my wings and could soar high over the hills of Vinci.
VR is an experiential medium, and I really wanted to instill experiences with this sort of sense of awe and wonder of what it means for humankind to be able to fly.
As a VR creator, you know, one of the biggest challenges is how we get our work out there. People who don't have headsets often don't get to access this content, and it's a real shame because obviously the technology is still quite expensive and is not in everyone's hands. Getting out these new forms of storytelling to a very diverse audience is really crucial, and crucial to think about that in the future in terms of a kind of touring group of venues that can take on this sort of content.
So I think the arcade, it provokes some real questions about how we collect and preserve this form. They're not entirely different from the ones that I think the museums and galleries and cultural institutions have been grappling with other digital forms, particularly say perhaps computer games. But this is a new medium and it does need to be thought about now. What it's done at the moment is created an online gallery, a virtual experience within which is nested virtual experiences, and that's really worked. It's really, really worked. Albeit at the moment that because of the device constraints, we sometimes have to take it out to people, which the Catapults have brilliantly done.
We've been able to show thousands of people around the world how wonderfully rich British immersive content is. And if we can find a way going forwards of making that ever more accessible, then we'll have reached part of our goal.
All right. So I'll try to get to my presentation, which is here. Okay, so now you have a better idea what did we actually produce, and here. And so, yeah, so regarding the sort of premise for this project, obviously, like the institution is involved, ourselves as the Catapult and our funding body, we are not in the sort of archiving space. So it's not within our remit. So therefore, this project was never like positioned as a preservation restoration project, but because the selection that we ultimately displayed was a retrospective, and even if so it sort of became a restoration project, and even if most of the pieces of work actually were more than a few years old, obviously the technology is becoming, some of the technology is becoming obsolete, some of it is developing so rapidly. So we sort of were faced with many of the technical challenges that restoring even older work has to face. And this just basically, I would love to say that, go now and go to the Museum of Other Realities and visit the piece, all the pieces, but unfortunately the showcase is not available anymore. We hope to bring it back in some way or format, but basically what it meant in practice for us when we produced this is that we licensed the pieces for a limited period of time. So each piece was shown for 2 months and plus 1 month as a kind of when all the pieces were there. We also phased the 12 pieces in total into 3 volumes, and that was also like a practical thing. And this all just like, in my mind, speaks to the sort of commercial reality of restoring this kind of work and making it accessible. So there's not really, the funding has to come somewhere, and we like to pay, obviously, the creators for their work. So the short paper that I produced for the proceedings outlines these things in more detail. But what I certainly hope is that if there's people in the room, or somebody who is in a position to, for instance, put together a national retrospective, I think our insights are of worth and useful to familiarize with. So I can already say that based on what we did, there was a similar initiative inspired by our work in Canada, not as extensive, but still in spirit very similar. So just to summarize some of the sort of practical concerns and learnings. So what we really learned from this project was that it's not only about restoring the technology and content as such, but there are much more sort of practical, pragmatic things in doing this. So in many cases, it was also trying to restore the creative team that was originally responsible of producing the piece of work. Because as you saw from the video, it was not just that you could launch the original experience, but there was also a chance to sort of customize the space where it was exhibited to the sort of brand, or at least the sort of look and feel and mood of the original piece. And we could give that control to the creators if we were able to find them, and if they were able to prioritize this over other engagements. In some cases, we actually, we had to make sort of compromises. We wanted to create really what we thought, we had a panel of curators regarding the content of what would be the best, absolutely best solution, selection of British content. But some of the greatest productions, their teams demanded such creative control over how they want the work to be displayed. So our technological constraints with the Museum of Other Realities platform, and at times schedules and all that kind of stuff, we just couldn't give that control. So therefore we couldn't display all the work that we wanted. And even when we could, sometimes it became a very practical, time-consuming issue of chasing access to assets. So in practice, if you look at these projects, the actual pieces of work, they tend to be either like a Unity or Unreal Engine project on somebody's hard drive somewhere. And it might have been like 4 or 5 years since anybody has touched that project. And so they barely even know where it is. And there's not much documentation and stuff like that. So we had situations also where regarding the intellectual property ownership, we had everything in place to launch a new piece of content as part of a volume to the work, but we hadn't found the sort of creative and legal ownership. We hadn't found a person to sign off that contract. So we had to get all those pieces together, even if the sort of technical issues had been already solved. So those are the types of things that you don't necessarily anticipate when you tackle this kind of production, and therefore I think we gained some really useful insights. Finally, even if the actual VR showcase is not currently available, there was always another piece to this project, which is what we call the timeline. So this website, which you can access and where the video also that I showed is accessible from, is a timeline of 20 years of UK produced immersive content. So you can see that. And there's also like, I've recently gone to universities in the UK to sort of disseminate these results, and I've designed a creative exercise around the timeline, and you can also find those resources from the website. So with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you have a quick question while Dan is setting up.
Yeah. Okay, it's really very short question. Yeah. How did you select the 12 projects? Because it's a British perspective, I understood.
Yeah,
but on the other hand, I mean, there must be more than 12 projects in the last 12 years.
So I mentioned briefly. So we had a curating panel based on our team, our funders, and so we had okay. Is this one? So we had a panel of curators from our funding party, ourselves, and also other experts in the field. So we had like a short list, and then we started looking at, okay, what is available, what can actually technically be done, because obviously it was a VR environment, what we broadly spoke about immersive. So we would have liked to have also displayed augmented reality content in just like bringing some assets, 3D assets, for instance, into the museum. And also some of the work also that we ended up displaying had an original physical location-based installation with props and stuff. So we have to also negotiate that creative aspect of, okay, what is this sort of reimagining of the work in this case? But the short answer to your question is that we had a panel, a short list, and then as I mentioned, there were some compromises of what we could get, what was technically feasible, and so on.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite, and thanks for everybody's presentations. Fantastic. This is 4 interfaces for publishing collections that are offline in libraries that have been digitized, kind of nobody has access to really, just because they don't have the interface. So 4 interfaces for public collections. And so publishing collections with the flick of a hand. We're not actually, at the end, we're not publishing with the flick of a hand, we're publishing with 4 hand gestures. One like that, one like that, one like that, and one like that. So with that, we're browsing collections, examining images, zooming into images, changing volume, mixing, and annotating using a microphone, and publishing. Left and right, no. That's it, yep. Just like to see you run. Okay, so yeah, these are a series of collection interfaces that we put in museums, art galleries, libraries, public libraries, sound festivals, and also public plazas in more noisy environments, physical environments, less controlled environments. The 4 interfaces simplify in some ways. Top left, the first one, it mixes many collections of URIs. This one's an online interface, and Each collection produces a new wire diagram of the collection, and you'll see, I'll show you a video of it. It combines sound fields and image fields in the same visual plane. The second interface, top right, is a reduction. It's just two collections, but through 4 channels. And again, mixing, combining, recontextualizing by accessing different collections. Again, to the bottom left, again, there was a reduction, a simplification, and this just has a single collection. And the final interface removes altogether the digital interface, and it's done with this hand gestures, but it uses just a single collection as well. Yeah, so this being the first collection, I'm not sure the sound's on, but so this is this has multiple collections. Right, sound. The sound's not important just yet. So each of these is a single collection. That bottom, this is a collection of Scottish screen celluloid that's been digitized from refrigerated material. The left hand is a collection of generative artworks. And the bottom collection here is a collection of first generation mobile artworks made with first generation mobile phones. Whee! So as you see, it starts to combine different sound fields that are coming from different collections. Like a collection there is a collection of interactive puzzles. Right, there's a collection of magazine articles. There's also a collection of film monologues. It goes on, and you can have up to 9,999 collections, but that's ridiculous because visual and comprehension. But they're interactive like that, and you generate countless new compositions through play. So this was first developed as a performance tool and was used live, and it then became a website. It was online for 15 years or 12 years, and was exhibited as an artwork in itself. So moving on, this is it being performed live as an audiovisual instrument. It was used with different musicians and different performers, and that's in a public plaza in Spain. So that led to this second interface, which here we go. Collection. It has a collection of posters that were digitized by the Library of SIGGRAPH in Barcelona. A collection of Spanish Civil War posters, and it was a second collection of audio film recordings from Catalonia. And this was really taken from the DJ's interface. The DJ takes one record and the second record and combines it. So you could see the posters, you could combine 2 channels worth of posters and 2 channels of sound. The next element of this is the event composition.
This is where by having this performance element to it, a large screen space in the library, people gather around quite a central point for conversation about collections and for interacting in real space. So in the Library of St. Cugat, there's a living lab where citizens look at possible uses for technology and arts. So we took the modular components of the previous interface and invited people to bring their own digital collections. And using a large touch screen, we'd use different modules and combinations of modules to see what were the most effective, most interesting, most useful way of interacting with digital collections. And what we were working towards was a console, a digital console for libraries of public spaces which people could walk up to and interact with without any kind of problems. You know, they could just see it, play with it, examine the archive, and publish the material. So this led again to simplification. The next archive, the next interface, just has a single collection. We decided that mixing was not where the public was that interested in combining, except by combining their own annotations to the collection, their own comments. So this was a very lovely collection made by MACBA here and the Joan Brossa Foundation. It's a collection of 2,500 visual poems, unpublished, by the Catalan poet Joan Brossa. And after the living lab session with the citizens, the two modules that were the most enjoyed were this carousel for spinning through the archive, which is a lovely serendipitous effect of stopping randomly at things, but also being able to search, especially when you add a sound element to the carousel, so that people, especially children, would spin it for hours. And then the second useful tool was the zooming in, zooming out, which is, you know, the telephone interface, which had a nice effect on the large screen. This would go from the image to a very abstract space and a very abstract colour field, which was quite a nice transformation in the space to actually change the light field in the physical space of the interface. And then again, the annotation, we press the button and annotate and publish this to online. This was published to a Twitter feed. So the new collection was gradually published by the citizens with their own comments, geolocated. It was installed in different places in different countries, and could also investigate previous comments. The new collection that was being built of the combined annotations and the poems. So, because of the simplification that's gone on through these three interfaces, we were now able to get rid of the costly touchscreen interface, which really couldn't be installed in any kind of non-controlled environment. So this was, so we replaced it with the infrared sensor, which is relatively cheap. You can build one from components from a hardware store, and these and then because of the limitation or the limited interaction that the previous interface had, we could then do these 4 hand gestures. So spinning through the carousel, spinning through the collection. The infrared sensor could read this hand gesture, moving
selecting different parts of the image, zooming in, zooming out, and annotating or publishing. And we use these early learning toys they're non-electronic, they're just plastic objects, but they limit hand gesture. You can only spin a spinning wheel. You can only peg a peg. Unless you're a child, you can lick it as well or do other things with it. But those grown-ups know what to do, and then you can adjust your hand movement with the screen. So with these 4 hand gestures, we've got a very low-cost interface that can be used with large screen in whichever city place, such as underground stations, bus stops, as well as public libraries, museums. This reasonably playable interface for publishing digital collections. And that's special thanks to Salvatiani for guiding really the research arts, for guiding the Citizens Lab, guiding us towards the Citizens Lab research. And that's that. Thank you.
Daniel Aretz will be joining us online. And this is the last talk for the first 2 blocks. Then we will have a lunch break. Actually, a few announcements and then a lunch break.
Hello, hello. I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. I had to change my privacy settings. I was informed that the presentations would be played via your device, but I hope I can still share my screen right now. Should be possible. Can you see my screen right now? Hope you can. Yeah. Yes, I hear some. Yeah. Awesome. Then let me start and not keep you waiting any longer. Good afternoon, or still morning, obviously. No, you just are about to have lunch, probably. My name is Danielle Aretz. I'm a reader in journalism in the Netherlands, and I'm also a design researcher based at the Design Academy in Eindhoven, an international design school. And I will present you a research tool that we developed together with our partners, ID Fuse, a tech company, and Cream on Chrome, which is an artistic design research studio. And the tool is called Newslider. But before I do that, let me quickly introduce what we do actually in our research lab. We are based at the School of Journalism, and we work mainly with journalism researchers, but we also have quite a lot of design researchers involved in our institute. And we closely collaborate with our ICT partners, which means that we really try to develop as well as research the future of journalism, focusing on AI tools and make sure that they also become meaningful for investigative journalism, but also for new journalistic practices. And we do that with, you could call it almost a philosophy. We truly believe that journalists in general need to think as designers, which means that we focus on the practice of designers, the making, but also the tinkering with technology, and try to implement that in the educational system as well as in our research. And I think it's important to mention that upfront to also understand how we came about this project. Skip this one. What I'm about to present is a project that we developed over the past 2 years. It's called the 4D Newsroom, and the tool itself is called the News Slider. And it started actually with a research question of the two designers, Jonas Althaus and Martina Yu, who together are Studio Cream on Chrome. They started with the question, why is journalism each and every day starting anew? Why is there no longer time frame? And can we develop something that helps, empowers journalism to do better, to actually keep historical data into account when producing daily updates? And they were actually inspired by the Cubist movement, the art movement, thinking that why couldn't we create actually a sort of four-dimensional space of the newsroom, keep time as a factor into consideration. So that became the four-dimensional newsroom, first as a sort of almost crazy idea. And then we started to research this based on a couple of case studies. And one case study was the famous saying of Angela Merkel. You might still recall that saying that wir schaffen das. She mentioned that at the beginning of her political career, when we had a huge refugee crisis, we still have in Europe, obviously. But she mentioned that as Europe can deal with the refugee crisis. But when we looked at the archives and started to do a discourse analysis, which is a common method in journalism to do sort of close reading and critically reflect on how that saying is contextualized, we saw that this narrative actually changed radically over time. That this famous saying of wir schaffen das, that became almost, well, it was a famous quote, it still is in Germany, that it changed over time and that it actually became more narrow-minded. It wasn't still Europe could deal with the refugee crisis. No, it was the Germans, that could deal partly with refugees, and it was problematic enough. This is a sort of common method in journalism to do this kind of critical discourse analysis and see how context, language changes over time, how a debate evolves. So it's important research. However, it's very time consuming. And then we thought, can we actually do that in a smarter manner, making use of new and emerging technologies? We teamed up for this with the Institute of Beeld en Geluid, which is one of the largest archives in the Netherlands that have, well, all the television programs, also online news programs archived in a very well-maintained archive. It's called Claria. And this website and this archive could help us quite a lot with our idea to see how we could actually make sure that journalists could use historical information better. Well, together with our partner, Tijme Altena, who is also present, but I'm not sure whether he's able to present. Tijme, can you make yourself heard, or is that possible to join in? Don't think he can, so hopefully I will say the technical information correctly, otherwise you can definitely get in touch with him. What we did is actually use this archive and then develop something that we called News Slider, a research tool that helps us actually to come up with almost any research term. In this case, we focus on climate change, as you can see on the top of the page. And based on named entity linking, technology that makes actually combinations between that term and associates that with other famous and commonly used terms like climate policy, ecological affairs, heat stress, drought, the ozone layer, all these terms that are used quite frequently in the climate change debate. It immediately links these terms, and it looks in the archive how often these terms come across and how this debate evolves over time. So as you can see in this slider and the dashboard that we will present you right now, you see how these terms change over time. In the 80s, well, 1980, we were talking mainly about acid rain. And then, well, currently we talk quite a lot about emission rights, obviously. So it not only shows us how the wording changes, but also the sentiments, as well as iconic images, because we use the, this huge archive of the image archive of Beeld en Geluid. And we can show also some famous images, iconic episodes that really had an impact on that debate. We truly think that these kind of tools can be very helpful for journalism, because it's not only a very nice to have, because it was quite fun to develop that, but we also think it can be very meaningful for newsrooms. So after the development phase, we developed a sort of minimum viable product and tested this with a lot of journalists, also with policymakers and chief editors. And they saw quite a lot of value in the tool, because not only can it help them to contextualize almost any topic, it could also potentially, at least that's what we have in mind right now, offer really good guidance to the audience to also navigate their own archives. Because a lot of media outlets have quite a good and well-maintained archive, but never use it, never really open it up to the public. Whereas if they should, it could be a very engaging way, well, a very interesting way to engage the audience in news. Time is online, so maybe it might be nice to also ask him to explain a bit more about the technicalities. But before I do, it might be nice to show also that this installation is not only an online installation, but Cream on Chrome, the design studio, also turned it into a physical installation. So this is the installation that was exposed in ZKM in Karlsruhe, in Hasselt in the museum, many other places where this is actually a really nice exhibition and conversation piece for people to literally scroll through the news and well, be more engaged in current items. Having that said, I think it might be nice to also explain a bit more about the technicalities. Tijmen, can you add to this, please?
Yeah, I can perhaps briefly share a bit about what we've done. We created this as a web portal that's accessible when you're inside of the boundaries of these institutions. So for the Beeld en Geluid archive, for example, there are some IP issues related to having access to the archival material. So it's accessible when you're inside at their premises. And we use a number of new natural language processing techniques that are increasingly using AI. Focusing on stuff like sentiment analysis, automated term extraction, syntactic parsing of the text that accompanies a video or the speech that has been recognized by other algorithms to paint a picture of how the discourse changed over time, and how the utterances or descriptions of certain media has evolved and changed over time. And that gives a researcher, but also journalists, the opportunity to look at how the societal discussion, societal debate changes over time. We're still looking to expand this suite of tools and NLP approaches that we use to analyze this data. So also looking at topic modeling, and as Daniela mentioned, named entity linking, to also attach other entities from the world based on Wikidata to these types of analyses.
Yeah, I think we might still have a few minutes left, but then we can open the floor for discussion. Might be good to indeed mention, as Simon already said, we're still developing this tool. We're about to implement this also, at least that's the plan, in a couple of newsrooms in the Netherlands, but we're also in touch with the national government to see whether this could also be a very helpful tool for policymakers. I already mentioned that because they also notice that, well, our human brain has quite a lot of shortcomings, obviously, when it comes to historical data, especially for policymakers that have huge pile of information that they have to digest on a daily basis. So it could be very helpful to use these kind of tools to, well, sometimes refresh memories, see how specific debates evolved and what were iconic moments in time, to also see how sometimes they can tap into that or make use of that. So we will still continue working on this, and if you have any questions, we are very happy to have a debate about this. So I think we conclude with that.
Let's open it up for a couple of questions while Terry gets set up here. Questions for the new slider team? I think they're all kind of hungry.
Okay, so QR code, right? And then lower, yeah.
Oh, wait, we have a question.
Yeah, after the questions, right? Okay.
Sorry. Groeten uit Barcelona. Sorry, that was some Dutch. My question is, what is an impactor?
Thanks. It's the name of our product, so that's why it's in my.
Okay, sorry. Oh, okay, sorry.
But obviously, we will make quite some impact with this tool. So
yes,
good you ask.
I found it an interesting presentation. My real question is, how would you see this tool being important for new media art?
For new media art, yeah. No, definitely. It's I think that's mainly this is a collaborative project. I mentioned Studio Cream on Chrome already, a quite acknowledged design studio with a lot of international projects. They're doing quite some media art projects. This is one of their projects. It was exhibited already, what I just showed you, in a couple of musea, but I think what we really intend to is also use this this tool that is able to navigate these archives, but build it into a physical installation that cross these bridges that we so often see, especially in art contexts and musea. It's quite key to make these archives very tangible and very appealing. And I think that's where our design partner comes in. They really try to bridge that gap between the online and offline domain. So far, it's not really an artistic tool, it's really a research tool, though obviously you can use this for all kinds of artistic manners. We did a couple of projects already on sort of focusing on an image archives for newsrooms, so that they can use better, more representative images for the news coverages. Then this could be also a really nice tool to come up with new kinds of representations, because it helps to to look beyond the traditional way of representing stuff.
There's another question. Just make it quick, please. If you come up to talk to the microphone here.
So what are the sorts of copyright and reuse restrictions that exist on the materials that you present? This is particularly in the context of thinking of new media projects. Could someone simply do research and capture material for use in an installation, for example?
No, yeah, you're so right about this. This is well, almost a painful question, because that is really difficult. If we use these tools for media outlets and they would use it for their own archives, there is no problem there. For research, we can navigate quite a lot, but if we are about to use these data, and especially the iconic images, obviously there's copyright involved. So that is still something that we need to tackle. So far, it can be a really nice, as far as we focus on research, there is no problem, but if you use this in other contexts, you definitely need to take that into consideration.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the presenters today. I'm going to make a quick announcement before our lunch break. So just a reminder, we have an art exhibition downstairs showing on the TV screen near the entrance. And the second thing is that we have a drop box outside near the entrance here for comments about future ISEA. And also I'm listing two QR codes here. One is for the sign-in form. So if you're interested in getting more contact information about Global Archiving Network, you could use the sign-in form here. And for myself, I'm doing a research project for the summit. It would be greatly appreciated if you could spend 15 minutes or so to finish the survey form. Thank you very much, and have a good lunch, and we'll see you back after the lunch. Thank you.